Hello, students, and welcome back to BUSi 1071, the business of real estate. We are now into week 6. We are going to continue our discussion in podcast type format of the work-life balance. And I cannot stress enough, while this is not some sort of exact science and it's not mathematics, it's not algebra, this is something that people around the world get paid a lot of money to help professionals with. You need to understand, in a sales commission career, that's a situation where you're more likely than people in other careers to run yourself into the ground, to wreck your relationships, to mess up your family life, to lose your personal life altogether in your work. And I don't want to see that happen to you. I think real estate for commission sales can be a great career, but I've definitely had weeks where I've overworked myself. I've definitely had weeks in the well, you know how I'm in a seasonal market, and I've discussed that a lot, but I've had times where my main job is always teaching. My main job is fan shop, where real estate starts to interfere with that, and it's very stressful and it affects things, and I'm trying to do both at once, and there needs to be a balance. So as we wrap this up with our last week on work-life balance, I just wanted to make sure you guys understood the importance of it. This is not a topic to be taken lightly. That's why I had a guest speaker on it. That's why I gave you an entire book just on this. So let's get started for week 6. This lecture will be standard. It's going to be maybe a little over an hour, maybe in the neighborhood of that, to fill your 2-hour lecture slot, as there will be stopping and going and things that you're going to be doing in conjunction with the lecture. So we're going to talk about work-life balance still. This is our last week on work-life balance. Following this week, you will have your second mini test, which is also open book like the first one, and it will be worth 15%. There's a little more content involved, and we're going to be covering things from all the weeks where we covered work-life balance, weeks 4, 5, and 6. So how much work do you really need to make money? So we're going to get into that a little bit more today, and kind of almost where to draw the line, and I'll give you guys some ideas based on a lot of reading that I've done, and a lot of this still ties back into the book that you're going through for these weeks, which I found to be one of the better ones I've ever seen. I just thought it was very logical and obvious, and people just don't think of the obvious stuff sometimes. So with this particular situation, we're going to be focusing on the 80-20 rule. When I'm asking the question, how much money do you really need to make? The reason I'm asking you that question is because the 80-20 rule teaches us that 80% of our income is only coming from 20% of our efforts in sales. So all that other 80% you're doing and running around and just killing yourself to get it done, is it really making you that much more money? Now, I'm really negative on that argument people make in Canada when they say, oh, we pay such high taxes in this country that there's no point working any harder because you're not going to make any more money as a result of it. That is a complete load of BS, and that's just something lazy people say, okay? The more you work, if you work well and you know what you're doing, the more money you are going to make. But the reason I ask this question has nothing to do with that ridiculous argument that I've heard some of my friends make that run their own businesses. Oh, well, there's no point working any harder and getting any more clients. I'm just going to give the money back to the government anyway. I'm not going to make any more. That's nonsense. You will make more. You'll pay more taxes, but you'll still make more. I'm posing this argument to you because it will get to a point where money can't buy happiness. Everybody makes that argument. I've said in one of my other lectures, I don't believe that. I think having a lot of money can make your life a little better, but it does get to a point where you don't need more. And you might need your family time. You might need time for your relationship. You might need time for yourself. Don't forget about that. That's very important too. So it's good to know when you ask yourself that big question that 80% of your income is not a result of you working all the time. It's a result of that special 20% of that work that's really making things happen. Okay, so also we will cover more on health, attitude, and success rates, because a lot of working efficiently and working well and getting things done and making that 80% really count comes from having a better attitude. It comes from being healthy. And I found a really cool article. There's a million articles on this. I just really like the ideas in this one. And you could do your own reading too, but I always provide things that sometimes change every semester, but that give you a nice rounded, complete approach to it without having to read like 10 articles at once. So there is a little bit of extra reading this week, which is why the lecture will be slightly shorter. And let's get into the 80-20 rule. What the heck is this? So the general idea here is what I've already said. 80% of what you win or what you get, or 80% of the positive results are coming. Well, I'm saying it wrong. The premise of this rule is that 80% of the wins come from 20% of your work. No, I'm saying it right. It's there's really nothing confusing about this. It's the bulk of the money you make comes from less customers. The bulk of your success doesn't come from the whole of your efforts. It comes from that 20% of stuff you do really well or you do right. And the argument came from here. If you Google it, which I believe I already did. Yeah. So this goes way back. This is like late 1800s. The Pareto. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I remember this coming up in a sales course when I went to Michigan State. It's the same thing. They were talking about the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule. The law of the vital few is what they called it in my class. States that for events, many events, things that happen, not really in nature, but more human, 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. And that's basically translated into sales, as you read down here in the business sense of it. 80% of sales come from 20% of the clients. So all these other people you're talking to, and we'll get more into lead management and dealing with leads, and we're going to have a really good guest speaker in week 7 about that. That could not be more true. That it's and this is different, and you can relate it to your client base, you can relate it to your efforts, you can relate it to social media spending, advertising. You can relate it to. I mean, it's probably not that good in advertising. It's probably more like 5%, but that's the basic idea. 80% of sales come from 20% of your clients. So in a commission sales job, 80% of the money you make is only going to come from 20% of your efforts, because all of your efforts are made with your clients, whether they're leasing clients in real estate, they're buyers, they're sellers, you're selling businesses, you're doing mortgages, you took a totally different direction and went to the other side of real estate. There's all these different aspects of sales that connect back to real estate. And it's always going to be the same with every person I've met, with every article I've read, with the guest speaker we have next week, with everybody that I've talked to about this kind of stuff. That's where it comes from. So you got to look at that and then relate it back to work-life balance and say, okay, well, maybe I can be smarter about the 80%. So you have 20% here, and it's generating the 80% of your sales, the 80% of your income. So, and it's only from 20% of your clients, which means you have 80% more clients that you're dealing with that are only giving you a little bit. They're only giving you 20% back. So how can you work those deals smarter? How can you know when to say no? And these are all ideas that we're going to talk about today. So back to the notes here. This is courtesy of Salesforce.com. So they put it more into a business perspective, just like we were just talking about. Your personal actions, your products and services. 20% of your effort comes from, or 20% of your effort creates 80% of your results. 80% of your effort goes to the other 20% of your results. So this makes it really, really sensible, and it applies to all these different levels of business. Okay, it applies to customers. It applies to your employees. I saw it when I built my house. I saw this happening right in front of my face, and I didn't know how to politely deal with the contractors when it came to this, because I could see they were bringing in, especially I'm not going to specifically say who. I had a lot of contractors in my house, and they all had the big companies had many employees working on my house on any given day. And I could tell that out of the 5 they might have in my house, one of them was pretty much doing most of the work. So it totally applies to employees too, and products and services and customers. And you can't get away from it. Anytime you think this rule doesn't really apply, most people that have been in business for years could show you that it does. And it could not be more true in a sales commission job, especially when you're selling real estate. So let's go to Jordan, because Jordan has a whole chapter on this. Jordan has a whole chapter on the 80-20 rule, and this is going to be our focus for this lecture, to give you a lot of ideas. So I'm going to take a lot of Jordan's ideas, and then I'm going to give you my perspective on them. And hopefully by the end of this lecture podcast, you will have a better idea, or maybe even just a set of tools that you can use going into a sales commission job to not burn yourself out. Okay? So Jordan, talking about the 80-20 rule, makes some pretty good points. He made this huge point that you need to stay focused. And a lot of this was about not slipping some of your, 20% into the other 80 side, your 20% that's making all the income, knowing what stuff is really making the wins for you and knowing where you're making the big bucks. So you need to stay focused. But just staying focused in general on the task at hand helps you to deal with the 80 and the 20, because you're going to have to deal with them both. Obviously, we would love to know exactly what that 20% is going to be that's going to make us 80% of our income, and then just pump all our energy into that. But we never really know what's going to be the big win, what's going to create those big wins, right? And we can't just ignore the 80% that doesn't necessarily make all the big commissions and make all the money, but still has to be done. So in terms of a real estate commission sales job, that 80% might have to do with making sure your social media presence is always there and it's always on and it's always being updated in a reasonable amount of time. So what I did is I'm not very good with that because I have 2 jobs and I've got a lot going on. So I pay somebody to do that because I know that's not going to automatically make me more money. The amount of leads I get from that isn't big, but it has to be done because in the business that I'm in as a real estate salesperson, it's credibility. Everybody's got that. So if I don't have it, they're going to look at me and say, well, is this guy really on top of his game? Is he really doing the marketing we need him to? Okay, so you need to, and that jumps down to here, to stop getting stuck. You don't want to get stuck in things, especially the 80% things that are not making the 80% of your income. They're only feeding to that other 20%. You don't want to get stuck on those things and then find that you missed out on some of the 20% that would have made 80% of your income. So it just keeps flipping back and forth like that, right? And according to Jordan, 20% is the thing that moves the needle. 20% really changes your life. It changes your career. It's the things that are big game-changing type of events. And I can even see it when I look at the sales I have each year. There's like 4 or 5 sales at the very top that made like the bulk of my income, those big multi-million-dollar deals. Not that I have those every year, but when I do, that's what it looks like. But I don't ignore the little deals. Okay, they still keep the lights on, get the bills paid. So if you look at this in terms of life and the work-life balance, and that's why the 80-20 rule is so important, you have to look at what you're getting out of life. So Jordan says 20% of the things you do in your life, whether it's strictly related to your job or it's just something that you decided in your personal life that you're going to start doing, and then it turned into a career or it turned into something really great for your family, like you picked up music again and started doing something like that. It moves the needle. It changes your life. But then in general, in your life, you also have to pay your credit card bills. You got to put gas in the car. You got to change your oil. You got to mow the lawn. Okay, that's the 80%. That stuff's never going to change your life. It's just stuff that's happening. Okay, and then the 20% that really makes your life memorable or changes it's like you take a big trip, right? You go to this huge seminar and learn something new. So he's almost in this limbo realm, the way he's talking about it in the book, where it could be about your life in general and it could be about work, but he's explaining to you that whatever it is, there's always going to be the 80-20 rule. And if you stay focused, you know which things go where. Look forward. Okay, so looking ahead, the 20% is like the next level kind of stuff. You look ahead, you plan for the future, where the 80% is the stuff that's just happening right now, the stuff you have to do every day. So that's another way to look at it, right? According to Jordan, can we get around the 80%? No. You're never going to get it. Like I hire out a lot of stuff. I started making more money, so I don't mow my lawn anymore. I hire somebody to do it. Actually, he does a better job on the grass itself, but I probably do a better job like just with the cleanup afterwards, but it's not that big of a deal. I just don't have time, right? So it's part of I'm still dealing with it. I still have to hire the guy and pay the guy, but it takes up less time. So you can be smart about it. So no, you can't get around it, but there are ways to make it more efficient. If you're good with the 20%, you start making more money, you start making your life more organized, you might be able to, help things in the 80% side. So continued from that point, focus on the here and now is a way to do it. So, okay, you know what? This is really annoying that I got to put this piece of furniture together, but I just bought it. It needs to go in this room. I have people coming over on Friday. It's got to be done. I'm just going to listen to some music and do this right now instead of going and watching a show, right? So you can make choices and you can focus on what needs to be done right away. And then while you're doing that, you're looking over at a box that's full of some of your music that you still haven't converted to MP3s yet, which is, insane because most later millennials and Gen Z now don't even have CDs or vinyl. They only have MP3s. But this is something a Generation X like myself has to deal with. And it's something I don't have to do right away. I could do that later on. It's not going to move the needle for me. I know it's not a 20% thing. And while it might be something I want to do, I need to focus on the things that matter here and now, right? Make sure to set aside time for the 20%. Don't get so sucked into the here and now that you forget to deal with these big overarching these big picture goals, right? Keep some weekend time for your personal 80%. So exercise could be considered 80%. I mean, exercise at a certain level in your life may move you forward in your work life and your personal life and may become part of that 20% that's helping you to achieve all of your goals. But generally speaking, exercise is just something that most people should be doing. I don't make time for it anymore, and that's really bad. You still want to be social. You still want to keep your time and I've been talking about this all the way at the top bullets too. And you want to be ready for things to change, okay? And if all else fails, you can hire some people to do some of this stuff. So this is all about ways to deal with the 80%, okay? Prepare yourself that it might not always be the same. Don't freak out when it changes. Just be ready for it. So this is kind of a given with everything I'm talking about here. But these are all ideas that Jordan has that I completely agree with. And now I'll give you another example. I mean, I'm telling you that I've hired somebody to mow my lawn. I told you I hired somebody to do my social media. But these are things that don't matter as much. Let's look at my personal 80-20. That 80% of the happiness that I get out of my life probably is coming from 20% of the things I'm doing. That sounds really sad, but it's not like I'm completely unhappy going to work every day and selling houses. Especially, it's fun when you sell a house. It's really fun when my students are really excited about a class and I know they got something out of it and they get A's and they're excited. But that's not the same as going on a trip with my kids. That's not the same as convincing my wife to go in the ocean and try to surf with me and watching her just totally blow it, even though she claimed she could surf, and just loving her every minute more because of that. Like, these are the things that give me the 80% of my happiness, right? So as I started to take on both of these jobs, I had the real estate and I had Fanshawe was already going. Then I started to have kids. I started to have kids after I was doing both these things. And real estate was it was on the light side. So at this point, I was realizing that there were babies in my house and I wasn't around enough to be with the babies. So I had to make some decisions. Let's just jump over to my Instagram account because this will provide you with like a better visual representation of what I've been trying to do. Okay, so what was happening is I was at the college. I was going to my classes. When I was done with my college hours, I was off in the evening showing houses, trying to do deals. I'd wake up in the morning. I'd go back to my classes. I'd finish my classes. I'd go start showing houses again. I'd get home. I'd barely see my kids. Okay, now Fanshawe College does provide me with a schedule that is a little bit lighter in the summer, which really helps because the summer is when real estate is busy in Grand Bend. But what was happening there was happening when I was working in real estate a lot more in London. Okay, and I wasn't making that much extra money, but I was taking pretty much every lead I was getting, so I was trying to figure out a way in terms of the 80-20 rule to try and start mixing some of the 20 and the 80 in terms of my happiness in my life. So, and this was really hard to do, but it's something that actually started to work finally over the last couple of years. So I get the most happiness out of my life, the 80% of when I'm with my family, when I'm with my kids, when I'm doing the sports I love to do in the water, when I'm doing stuff like that. But this real estate thing on the side of Fanshawe College started to make me a little bit of extra money. It was just sucking up too much time, because every time I was home, I was trying to put together more marketing material for real estate and all this stuff. What I started to do was I started to do it at the same time I was with my family. Now I'm very lucky that this is a side job, a profession that I'd taken on where I could take my kids to a showing. And when I do that in Grand Bend, it's not a commercial deal. It's not something that's very formal. It was actually helping me. My kids are so personal with people. They're very outgoing, that this was actually contributing to my business. I never thought this would work, but I totally cheated. And sometimes you can get away with that. So what I was doing, and if you look at my Instagram account, you can actually see it. Like, here's my son. And in this video here, I'm going to see if you guys actually get this movie reference. I'll play this really quickly here. I don't even know if I'm recording system audio. I might be, I might not be. I don't think I am. I can't get into the options while I'm recording. I may not be recording system audio, but it should still come through the microphone when it plays on my speakers. So let's see what happens here. So this is from the movie The Sandlot. This is Generation Xers love to make their kids watch all the movies that we grew up on in the 80s. They don't get to watch all these new movies. I haven't really seen half the stuff that all these young kids are. I just make them watch all my old stuff. So Sandlot's a baseball movie. It's pretty sweet. And there's this one part in it that I always remembered. And funny enough, when my son first saw the movie, he started doing it right after he saw the movie. He started saying forever, forever. So for like weeks, we were screwing around and he kept saying it. And it was at a time when I'd shown a bunch of these Purple Bricks listings. Purple Bricks is like, well, it's comp-free. You guys may have seen this. I know a lot of people taking this course may not even own a house yet, but you may have been driving around in the city and you saw those green and yellow signs and they said comp-free on them, which stood for commission-free. So this is a real estate brokerage that is basically trying to teach sellers that you don't need a listing real estate salesperson. You just need to get it on the market, and a realtor might bring a buyer to you and you should still offer them commission, or you'll sell it yourself. So however you're doing it, at worst, you're only going to pay about half the commission you might pay if you hire a realtor. Now, I've been very competitive and I compete with that, but what I find most of the time is that anybody that's listed with Purple Bricks, which is the new comp-free, it's more often because they tried to talk to realtors about what they wanted to list for, and realtors wouldn't support their price because there's no market comparables. We'll talk about that more later in the course, how to price homes. But they just wouldn't support the price, so they never sell. So I'm trying to make a sneaky little joke about Purple Bricks, and I'm with my son, so I'm sort of combining me being with my family with the creation of marketing materials that I'm using for this commission sales job. And I can't do that with most jobs. I'm very lucky that I'm in a position where I can do something like that. Here's me with my brother and my sister-in-law, and we were just on the beach, and a buddy of mine, a photographer, had come up to shoot a listing for me, and I said, come down to the beach with us. He actually wanted to go to the beach, right? So he didn't really charge me extra for this, and then I got some material for my job coming from the 20% of my life that I love the best. And there's my former drummer there. I'm making fun of my brother. We were all in the band together. Oh, that's awesome. Anyway, so it's little things like that mixed in with the business. But I take my kids to showings. I will have my kids in videos about real estate. I'll go to the fireworks with my kids right here. And then I'll take a bunch of pictures and pump up Grand Bend as part of my professional life. But it's kind of fun for me. So there are people that spend way more time than I ever would on social media and doing stuff like this. And it's simply for the purpose of posting it so that their friends see it in their account. I have zero interest in that. But if I was hanging out with my family and I didn't have this job, maybe I might take a few pictures and show them to the rest of my family, like back in Michigan and stuff. So I kept thinking about that, and I'm like, why am I not always creating content? Why am I not always sort of not at work? My kids would not like to hear that. I'm not always working even when I'm with them, but I'm with them and they're helping me with my work, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's really, really tough, and I'm still very busy. I do have 2 jobs, but by involving my kids in my work more, and they have fun with it. They love it. They want to go to showings, and they want to try and say stuff about the houses and help me sell houses. Most parents who are also real estate salespeople would just think I'm nuts, thinking that this would actually be appropriate. But again, I did shift my business from London, where I was mostly working with investors and I was doing a lot of commercial stuff, and it wouldn't have been the same as being in Grand Bend and having whole families show up to see a place near the beach with their kids, and then my kids are there too, and then they're playing together while we're showing the house. It's pretty interesting the way that's worked out for me, and I'm very, very lucky that I've found a way to try and balance some of my the 80% of stuff I have to do just to be, just to get by, with the 20% of my life that I love to do. Because let's be honest, when you look at the work-life balance and the 80-20 rule in terms of just life, and you don't separate work and you don't separate your personal life, you just look at your entire life, most of your time awake is going to be spent freaking working. And that sucks. I don't think that's what humans were meant to do. We were born as organisms just like animals and other types of mammals, and they just get to hang out and eat and do stuff all day, but we're all working. So I'm trying to bring in some of that family life, which is part of Maslow's hierarchy. I don't know if you guys have taken a lot of psychology classes, but that's pretty high up in the pyramid of, like, that's important, that you need that connection and the love and the family, and you can mix that with your career. You can do that with commission sales careers, because your hours are what you make of them most of the time. You're going to be your own boss. So really expanded a bit on his bullets here, but what I'm saying is I'm doing a lot of this stuff and combining it with my work, and it's actually helping. But this isn't really, I'm still not creating the clear divide, though, between the 80-20 rule and the commission sales career. That we already did that at the beginning. What Jordan got into was really how to be successful in life in general, whether it's work, whether it's personal, whatever it is, and that 20% of the stuff you're doing is going to result in 80% of your success. Okay, but my opinion of that is that there's this happiness that you want to get out of your life as well, and 20% of the things you're doing will result in 80% of your happiness, because all the stuff you're doing is mostly work. So what I'm trying to do is mix those two things together, and it's actually working for me, which is really cool. But just in general, in terms of success and big picture things and moving forward and moving the needle versus just paying the bills and mowing the lawn and blah, 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 the 20 versus the 80, when you get to the 20, you got to own it. You got to take it seriously. You got, like I'm telling you guys to take this work-life balance thing seriously. You have to read up on the thing that you decide is going to be your 20%. You're going to be a professional musician. You better learn all about it, right? How could you not know that by this point? If you're going to be a professional musician, you better be really freaking good. And that better be your passion. And you better be looking into new ways to get better all the time, okay? You should be writing about it. You should be blogging about it. You should be doing things that maintain your health specific to what you're doing for that 20%. Okay, so a large part of my claim to fame in Grand Bend is that I know the beach better than any other realtor up there, because I'm the kiteboarder guy. I'm the guy that brought kiteboarding to Grand Bend. I go out when it's bigger than ever, when nobody else will go out. I own the lake, right? This year, in part because I got attacked by a dog, but I really haven't been out there much. And I think it affects my knowledge and my ability to sell these lakefront properties, because I'll get to some of them and I will not have seen the beach for months, because I only go to my own beach, and I haven't been. When I kiteboard and I do downwinders, I'm all over the place. I'm seeing everything. So that would be a thing that would definitely be part of my health, but it also contributes to my business. I'm not owning it. I'm saying I'm that guy, but this year I didn't own it. WTF are you doing with your life? Like, do you really know? Like, so this is why I like the book, because I knew as soon as I was putting this portion of the course together, when I was going to talk about the 80-20 rule, it was all going to be examples about how 20% of the commissions I make, 80% of the commissions I make come from 20% of this small little clientele base, if not even more extreme than that. Last summer, it was like, God, one client was responsible for more than half of the money I made in real estate last year. One client. So it really is like that. And that's what all of my focus would have been until I saw Jordan's book, and he really put it into perspective in terms of your life in general. If you don't have any idea or any direction of where you're going in terms of the big picture and what your big goals are, you're not even looking at your 20%. That's what he's trying to say. So make sure you keep up on all that 80% stuff. Make sure you block out the time to get it done, but you have to set aside part of your life to devote to this 20%, because that's where all your success and all the big things that happen to you in life are going to come from. Look at people having a baby. I mean, that's like the biggest deal in a lot of people's lives, is when they have children. And how I'm making a joke. I'm not making a joke about sexual intercourse or anything like that, but like, how much time do you really think was put into the setup for having these children? And then the result of what comes out of it for most parents that really love their kids. And this is not something about, what my brother and his wife decided individually before they met each other, which is why they get along so well, they weren't going to have kids. And they have an awesome life too. And they love my kids. They're great with my kids. They just didn't want to have kids. So I'm not saying you have to have kids to be happy, and it's just an example. Like, look at the sheer amount of stuff that comes out of having children, and look at the amount of effort that was put into making that happen. And again, I'm not making a comment about the actual act, the physical act of getting pregnant. I mean, that that could take seconds, right? I mean, no pun intended, but joke, but it's just, holy cow. I mean, it literally happens in a matter of seconds to minutes, and it changes your life forever. It's huge. So it's a perfect example of like nature showing us the 80-20 rule. I mean, it really is true. So step back, look at where your life is going, spend some time thinking about that. You're not sure if you want to have kids or not. You do want to have kids. You're not sure how you're going to. Step back and think about it. Put a little more effort into when you're going to do it. How you're going to do it in terms of where you're going to live, what kind of house you're going to be in. Like, don't wait too long. I mean, you don't want to have kids when you're 50, although there's nothing wrong with that. But you want to spend as much time with them as you can. But these are the two sides of it, right? My whole lecture started all about the standard 80-20 rule that all sales trainers talk about, and people will go on and on about social media marketing and advertising, and you got to plug here and you got to plug there and you got to do all these drip campaigns and all this stuff, when they all know that the bulk of your business is coming from the people you already knew probably before you even started in that sales career, or the ones you started off with at the very beginning that you kept with, that you stayed with. But Jordan put it into more of a life perspective, okay, and I really like that. Okay, and he has lots of good lists in his book and things to consider when you're trying to sort your life out, and that's another reason I liked his book as well. It wasn't overly dramatic, it wasn't too long, but it gave a lot of nice like packaged up lists of things you can carry with you to be just better with yourselves, to be better with balancing all of this stuff in your life and with work. Okay, so here's another way that he had sort of laid it out. And I'm kind of interpreting this and putting it into my own words then. The 20% is like your life goals, your passion, what's going on in your heart, family, heart, love, right? And if you look at that in terms of the career, that is the 20%. You're not in commission sales to make no money, right? So this is your 20% are like the big ones, the clients that are the most important to you, the listings that you're most passionate about in terms of real estate. So you can take Jordan's stuff and relate it right to that career. The 80%, what has to get done? All the freaking paperwork I'm doing as a realtor all the time that drives me nuts, but it's still got to get done. In terms of life in general, the 80% maybe just is earning a living so you can go fishing every weekend and do what you really love to do in terms of productivity. Entertainment isn't always part of the 20%, okay? Sometimes you just need to get out there and have a couple beers with your friends. Sometimes you just need to go see a band. You need to go to a movie. And that's not necessarily, pushing the needle, like moving your life forward, but it still matters, right? It still goes towards something. So once again, one of the reasons I really like Jordan's book is he pulls you out of your career and he makes it a life thing. And that's why I felt like we could relate to it. Now, let's get off the book for a little bit, and I'll talk a bit more about that before the end, because you will have a test coming up and it will question you a fair amount on the book. I'm going to give you like this 5-minute basic rundown of things to kind of look at for the test, and I'll do it in a separate video. But I want to talk about this guy. So this is, I'm just going to start off and warn you guys ahead of time. This guy was the guy that invented that online wine store. He's very well known as a digital marketer. He's sort of a pioneer in many fields in terms of digital marketing. And now he's almost more of a consultant. He still deals with the wine store a lot, but he's a pretty big deal when it comes to social media marketing and being ahead of the trend. His name's Gary Vaynerchuk. They call him Gary V. Okay, if you've seen him on TV, if you've seen him on the news, they'll have to bleep him out the entire time. So if you're going to watch this video and you're easily offended by vulgar language or swearing, maybe look up on YouTube one of his cleaner videos. But I really, really like the message he's trying to send here. So I'm assuming you have the notes up with me while you're going through this podcast. So now at this point, you're going to pause the video and you're going to watch Gary's video with this guy. It's about 5 minutes long. There is a ton of swearing. I am not condoning that. I just think it's the better version of seeing Gary V talk about this. And he made a joke that it's the 79-21 rule, because he thinks that if you can at least come to terms or have some kind of idea, you know what, we're going to talk about it after you watch the video. And then I'll explain why he said 79-21, which he doesn't really talk about much once the video starts. But pause my podcast now, watch this video, and then come back to me. Okay, so what is he really trying to say? All right, what besides all the swearing, because there's a lot. And if you just watch the video, you know what I'm talking about. He's dropping F-bombs pretty much every other sentence. But he is making a very, very strong point, okay? Let's go over some of the things he talked about. He talked about how he was on top of Twitter right at the beginning. Yeah, so what? So he's so smart and he knew Twitter, but as soon as he saw it was working, he went heavy. He went hardcore. He dumped it all into that. So as soon as he catches on to something that's working, he doesn't believe in like the stockbroker's idea that you need to diversify and spread out and go. He says, you know what? You go heavy into that stock if that's the one that's going and you know it's going. Why wouldn't you? Just to be safe? Because he knows that was working. So in my words, and this would be a great thing to have on the mini test coming up, actually, I probably put the question just like this on there. As it pertains to social media, if 80% of your success is coming from 20% of your efforts, take your freaking efforts and put it into that 20%. Put it into Instagram. If 80% of your leads are all coming from Instagram, stop spreading out your spending across 5 different platforms. Take 80% of your spending and put it into Instagram, and then you should still be paying a little attention to the rest, a little bit. But you don't want to completely ignore them, but you want to go heavy in the one that's really working, okay? And that would be the answer to a multiple choice question if I asked you what Gary was trying to say, what his point was. Okay, instead of spreading out like equally across all the platforms, and then you're still getting 80% of your results from only one of them, from 1 out of 5, which is 20%. So here's the cool thing. It's hard to know what's going to happen and where the 80% is going to come from. But with social media, because of analytics and because it's so easily tracked, you know when it's working. So if you know when it's working and everything's coming from this one platform, you go heavy in there. Okay, and that was his point of changing it from 80-20 to like 79-21. He's like, no, add a little more to the side that's working. You know, if 80% of your stuff is coming from that 20, make it 21. Push it a little harder. But he was making a stronger point than that. He was saying going heavy. So there are times when you see the 80-20 rule in play, like in the flesh, so to speak, or in the digital flesh, and you can actually tell where the 80% of the success is coming from. And if you know that for sure and you can see it, then pull some off the other ones. Go heavier into the one that's working. Why? It makes perfect sense, right? But people get stuck in their ways. They think you got to be doing, oh, I have to be on LinkedIn, I have to be on Twitter, I have to be on Facebook, I have to be on Instagram. Okay, LinkedIn and Twitter have never done anything for me in real estate. Only Facebook and Instagram have. So I have everything going to those guys. I should still be doing something with LinkedIn, but my LinkedIn account is mainly for my profile as a professor here at Fanshawe. I don't get in there very much. I should get in there more often. LinkedIn is becoming, I have heard, and I'm trying to keep up with it, but it's becoming a better platform for marketing, especially if you're in sales. So I might need to take another look at that and create a second profile. But I just don't want people to find me on LinkedIn and not recognize that Fanshawe is my main thing, not real estate. Okay, if they go to my real estate website, obviously they might not even figure out that I'm a professor at Fanshawe, but that's just the way it's set up. Okay, so holy cow, that was a lot on the 80-20 rule, and a lot about Jordan's book and what he's trying to tell us about it. So if you're going to go out there and you're going to try and nail that 20% that's going to give you 80% of everything you want in your life, what could you do to make it better? And this is where health and attitude and just being a more pleasant person and just doing things that are just easier on the people around you will make a difference. If you don't believe it, trust me, I've tried. I've done experiments on it. I've tried to be hard on my clients. It never, ever works, okay? I generally like to avoid conflict anyway. I talked about that at the beginning of the course. But I'm telling you, this isn't an exact science. I know some of you may think this stuff is really hokey, but it works. So we're going to stop the video again, and you're going to spend some of your time for this week going over this article. So in my face-to-face class, I actually had my students, we stopped and we did a bit of a breakout session, and they went over the article together, and then we brought it back up and discussed it. I can't do that as well with my online students, so what I'm going to ask you to do is take a look at the article and then talk to your roommates, talk to some family, talk to some friends, and be like, listen to this. Like, do you think this stuff really works? Like, come on. Like, please. Okay, so pause the video and go to it and then come back, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents on it for about 4 or 5 more minutes, and then we're going to wrap up, and then we are ready for the mini test. I'll have a quick review video, and we're ready to rock. Okay, so as you can see, this is not a brand new article. This is This is an article I used in another class. I think I could use this article for 10 years, to be honest. I just think that the points that Keith here is making, Keith, I never liked that name. There's a Family Guy joke about that. The worst name. I might even play that at the end of our video just for fun. It's kind of funny. But I never judge a person by their name. I think this guy's actually pretty smart, because the points he makes here are just so darn obvious, but it's so hard to remember to do these things sometimes, especially if you're having a bad day. So he talks a lot about attitude, and then he gives you these 10 strategies. Number 1, stop being so hard on yourself. Okay, like, be positive. Like, life's not that bad. Okay, this isn't conviction and faith. This isn't all about religion, although, while I don't believe that much in religion and organized religion and church, I still go to church just because I think it's a nice thing in community and to have faith in something. And Yeah, mainly because my wife likes me to go to church. So hopefully she never watches this video, but I love my wife, so why wouldn't I, right? So, be good to yourself. Send yourself positivity. Positive stuff leads to more positive stuff. Self-motivation through discovering your motive. So why are you doing the things you do? What are the greatest things you've done, and why did you do those? Try and work those motives into the things you're struggling with and see how that goes. Visualize it, like The Secret and The Power of Now, that Eckhart Tolle book. So cool. It's really neat stuff. And I'm sure you guys have heard of The Secret. And there's there's a documentary on quantum physics. It sounds more, what the bleep do we know? That's what it was about. Really interesting stuff. They actually had this experiment where they took a bottle of water and they wrote positive and negative things on it. And with this super microscope, they could actually see the molecule. And that just is one of those things that makes you wonder if we aren't all part of one living thing. But let's not get too spiritual here. Just think. It's kind of like the first one. Think positive, visualize success, and it might happen to you. Okay, attitude talk. And this ties into here. So attitude talk's a way of overriding your past negative programming. So keep this internal voice going. Use positive words. Tell your brain everything's okay. The words you speak out loud should be positive. One little negative word can turn somebody off in an article. There's tons of research on this. Tons. Okay, so be careful with the words you use. Use a positive greeting. Super, fantastic. There's a South Park character. The South Park character, Big Gay Al. It's an if you know South Park, you know that those the creators of South Park are actually they're not derogatory at all toward genders, toward specific groups, anything having to do with sexuality. It's just they take the most extreme examples of everything and make fun of that. And funny enough, as much as they were making fun of it, the coolest thing about Big Gay Al, the character in South Park, is how much everybody loved the guy because he was so freaking positive. That's what was, and he was also, I might have to throw some of that at the end of this lecture too. It's a perfect example. It's a fictional example, but it kind of works. Enthusiasm, that's an obvious one. Connecting to your spiritual empowerment, that kind of ties into some other ones too. Some of these are sort of overlapping on each other. Humor, you know what? Hey, never hurts to laugh. They always say laughter is the best medicine. And exercise, holy crap, if I have not been bad to my body, I've never been more out of shape in my entire life. All I used to do is run and kiteboard. And now I don't, because all I do is work. Where's the work-life balance, right? It's something I need to work on. And I think if I was exercising more, I would actually be more productive in my work life. I know it, yet I can't bring myself to do it. So some really obvious stuff in here, but just a really simple, to the point, great list of things that honestly I could give this to my kids in 20 years from now and I'd still believe it to work, because this kind of stuff has worked for me. And I've worked with a lot of people in sales careers. Remember, based on my personal introduction that I gave weeks and weeks ago, working in real estate is not my first career in commission sales. I worked in telecommunications. I was doing door knocking. I was going door-to-door cold calling. That was interesting. And holy cow, did I have to stay positive through that. So let's wrap up our week 6 content lecture on a positive note with all those neat things we just talked about. And I'm going to remind you guys at this point, you should be through the Balance Point book, okay? I will, maybe not completely randomly, but I will ask you about specific things from the book on this mini test. And yes, this mini test is an open book test. It's open resource. I'm not making it proctored. And I know that my online students are nowhere near each other. So you're going to be in front of a computer with a time limit, same exact time limit my face-to-face students are given in the classroom, 50 minutes. And you need to get these questions answered, okay? So if you've at least looked through the book and you have an idea of where things are, like this point right here that I'm making, that might really help you when you're going to take the test, okay? And look at the lists that he provides in the different chapters. There's a lot of really good ones in there, and just focus on the main points. You don't have to read every word of it, but it really isn't that long. I don't know why you wouldn't. And that'll be the end of our purchase resources for the course. Going into week 7, we will start with articles and content that I'm bringing from my own direct industry experience and guest speakers. And it will be in the now, and that's why I don't want you guys wasting. But there's no way I'd ever make you buy a book on social media marketing and real estate in 2019 when I know it's going to be different in 2020. I will basically provide to you, I wouldn't say that actually. A lot of the things will still be the same in terms of content and direction. It's just that the platforms might change, names might change. Those aren't good books to buy. Okay, you can get everything you need to know about that online and from me. So this will be the end of our book stuff, and we will have the mini test coming up. It'll be launched on FOL. Depending on the semester, your dates may vary. Get it done by the deadline. Usually once it's launched, you'll have at least a week to 10 days to get it done. And that'll be that. So watch for a quick video after this one that'll give you sort of a crash course review for the 15% mini test. And this is mini test 2 because it's your second mini test. The first one was 10%. And once you go through that, you should have a good idea of kind of what to focus on. Do not just go into this thing, open it up in FOL, in FOL, not having looked at anything, thinking that it's open book and you can just look everything up. You want to go through all the notes I provide. You want to have watched the lectures, and you want to have done the readings, and then you should be good. Okay, so hoping you guys got something out of that. I know it's a lot of it's hippie talk. I like to call it hippie talk, but this stuff really works, guys. Okay, I've been down. I've had my really hard months, and I've overworked myself. And when I start to apply some of the things we talked about in this content lecture, it's helped me. Okay, so I will see you in the next one for a very quick mini test review, and then you're off and running for the mini test and on to week 7 after that. Thanks for listening.